The alarm screamed through the palace corridors as Kira sprinted barefoot across polished stone, her small human hands clutching a stolen security tablet. Behind her, 4 Valerian guards thundered in pursuit, their chitinous armor clattering like avalanche stones. She was 7 years old, and already knew the palace layout better than most of the staff. The servant tunnels would buy her 3 minutes. Maybe 4 if they stopped to argue protocol. She slid around a corner, breath ragged, and ducked into a maintenance shaft. The tablet's screen glowed against her face. Emergency evacuation. All diplomatic personnel to report to designated zones. The words meant nothing to a child, but the red symbols pulsing across the screen meant everything. Danger. Real danger. The ship carrying her parents had entered the system 12 hours ago. Now those same icons showed it drifting, silent, toward the planetary defense grid. Kira squeezed through the shaft and dropped into the royal wing. Forbidden territory. The guards would be here in seconds, but she needed to reach the one person who could actually do something. She ran past murals depicting Valerian conquest, past windows overlooking the capital city where 3 moons hung like watchful eyes. The throne room doors stood open. Inside, Queen Alzera rose from her seat, her 4 arms moving in precise gestures as she received reports from her advisors. The queen was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, her carapace gleaming deep purple in the light. 2 compound eyes dominated her face, with smaller sensory organs clustered along her temples. She radiated authority like stars radiate heat. Kira burst through the circle of advisors. "Your Majesty!" Her voice cracked. "Please, you have to help them." Every conversation stopped. 20 faces turned toward the human child standing on sacred ground, tracking mud across floors where wars had been declared and treaties signed. The head of palace security moved forward, but Queen Alzera raised one hand. The gesture held more command than any shout. "Approach," the queen said. Her voice resonated through multiple vocal chambers, creating harmonics that made human ears ache. Kira stumbled forward and dropped to her knees. She'd seen the diplomatic families do this, though she never understood why adults made themselves small before anyone. But her parents were dying up there, and pride meant nothing against vacuum and silence. "The ship," she gasped, holding up the tablet with shaking hands. "Something's wrong. They're not responding. The defense grid will fire in 17 minutes. Queen Alzera took the tablet with one delicate claw. Her eyes scanned the data faster than any human could process. The advisors shifted uneasily. One spoke in rapid Valerian clicks, but the queen silenced him with a look. "This channel is for military emergencies," she said to Kira. "You access restricted networks." "I had to." Kira's fingernails dug into her palms. "They teach us where the emergency terminals are. In case of invasion. Of attack. Not for personal matters. They're going to die." The words came out flat. Kira had already cried every tear she had during the run here. Now there was only the terrible clarity of knowing exactly how many minutes remained. 16 minutes now. "Please!" The throne room held its breath. Protocol demanded the child be removed, probably disciplined, certainly never allowed to address the queen directly again. But Queen Alzera had ruled for 40 cycles, had survived 3 coups and 2 assassination attempts, and she recognized desperation when it stood bleeding determination onto her floors. "Defense Command," she said crisply. An advisor stepped forward with a communicator. "This is Alzera. Hold fire authorization on approaching diplomatic vessel. Scramble rescue shuttles immediately. I want engineering teams, medical units, and a full hazard assessment team launched within 5 minutes." The advisor's mandibles clicked in surprise. "Your Majesty, the protocols for disabled vessels are now superseded by direct royal command." Her tone could have cut steel. "Move!" The throne room exploded into activity. Officers rushed to terminals. Communication channels opened in cascading waves of sound. Kira stood frozen, hardly believing what was happening. The queen returned the tablet to her, and for a moment their eyes met. "They will try," Queen Alzara said quietly, only for the child's ears. "I promise nothing more." "Thank you." Kira's voice broke on the words. "Now go with Commander Thex. He will take you to observation where you can monitor the rescue." The Queen gestured, and a scarred veteran guard approached, his posture careful and controlled. "And, child? The next time you need my attention, use the door chime like everyone else." Kira managed a shaky nod before Thex guided her away. As they left, she heard the Queen's voice rising again, coordinating the rescue with the precision of someone conducting a symphony of survival. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs, hope and terror mixing until she couldn't tell them apart. The observation deck overlooked the palace landing platforms where rescue shuttles were already launching, their engines turning night into day. Thex stood beside her, saying nothing, but his presence felt solid and reassuring. On the main display, she could see her parents' ship, a dying firefly against the stars. 14 minutes until the defense grid fired. Kira pressed her forehead against the cool glass and prayed to God she didn't believe in. The rescue shuttles moved like silver arrows through the dark, their formation perfect despite the impossible speed. Kira watched the tactical display with eyes that understood more than any 7-year-old should. Her parents had taught her to read these screens during long voyages, turning navigation lessons into games. Now those games had become her only window into whether they lived or died. "Lead shuttle achieving intercept in 90 seconds, a technician announced from his station. The observation deck had filled with personnel, though most kept a respectful distance from the human child whose stolen tablet and forbidden plea had set this all in motion. Commander Thex remained beside her, his secondary arms clasped behind his back in parade rest. He'd served under Queen Alzara for 20 cycles, had seen diplomatic incidents that would have shattered lesser rulers. But he'd never seen Her Majesty override defense protocols based on a child's word alone. "What's the ship's status?" Thex asked the technician. "Life support failing. Hull breach in sections 4 and 7. No engine power, no communications array." Whatever hit them took out primary systems. The technician's antennae drooped. "They're running on emergency oxygen. Maybe 30 minutes left. If they're lucky." Kira's hands clenched into fists. 30 minutes. The defense grid would fire in 12. The lead rescue shuttle pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. "Contact established. Beginning docking procedures. We've got movement inside. At least 2 life signs confirmed." Something in Kira's chest unknotted slightly. 2. Her parents. They were alive. For now. "Defense grid?" Thex asked. "Holding at Her Majesty's command. But protocol requires reactivation if we detect any hostile action from the vessel. That ship couldn't threaten a cargo hauler right now," Thex said dryly. The display showed the rescue shuttle extending its docking collar, magnetic clamps seeking purchase on the damaged hull. Kira counted her own heartbeats. 10. 20. 30. The clamps locked. The shuttle pilot confirmed seal integrity. Cutting through. Hulls compromised, going slow to avoid. An explosion of static. Every screen in the observation deck flickered. "Report." Thex barked. "Emergency decompression in the target vessel. Section 4 collapsed. We're venting atmosphere." The pilot's voice stayed level despite the chaos Kira could hear behind his words. "Compensating. Medical team is through the collar. They're searching now." Kira stopped breathing. She didn't realize it until spots appeared at the edges of her vision, and Thex's hand settled carefully on her shoulder. "Breathe," he said quietly. "They trained for this. Best rescue teams in the sector." She dragged in air that tasted like copper and fear. Minutes crawled past like wounded things. The tactical display showed more shuttles arriving, forming a protective perimeter around the dying ship. Engineers began cutting through sections, creating new access points. It was beautiful and terrible, watching so many people risk themselves for 2 diplomats they'd never met. All because a child had run through forbidden corridors and demanded a queen's attention. We have them. The pilot's voice cut through the observation deck like lightning. 2 humans unconscious but alive. Multiple injuries. Getting them to medical shuttle now. Kira's knees went weak. Thex caught her elbow, kept her upright. Vital signs? Someone asked. Weak but stable. They'll need surgery, but they'll make it. A pause. Tell Her Majesty the rescue is successful. The observation deck erupted in controlled celebration. Technicians allowed themselves brief smiles. Junior officers exchanged glances of relief. Thex's mandibles clicked in what Kira had learned was satisfaction. But she couldn't celebrate. Not yet. She pressed against the window, watching the medical shuttle detach from her parents' ship and begin its descent toward the Palace Medical Facility. Only when she saw it touch down safely, when the doors opened and medical teams rushed forward with floating stretchers, did she finally let herself cry. Thex handed her a cloth without comment. She pressed it against her face, muffling sobs that came from somewhere deeper than tears. Come, Thex said eventually. Her Majesty will want to know you've been informed. They walked through corridors that felt different now, less like a maze and more like a path. The throne room had emptied of the earlier chaos, leaving only Queen Alzera seated in conversation with her chief advisor. Both looked up as Kira entered. The child bowed, deeper this time, holding the position until the Queen made a small gesture of release. Your parents are in surgery, Queen Alzera said without preamble. The physicians expect full recovery, though it will take time. Thank you? The words felt too small for what the Queen had done, but they were all Kira had. I'm sorry I broke protocol. I'm sorry you did what any child would do to save their family. The Queen leaned forward slightly. But you did it with intelligence and speed. These are not small things. She paused, compound eyes studying the human child with an intensity that made Kira feel transparent. How old are you? 7, Your Majesty. 7. Something that might have been amusement flickered across the Queen's features. Tell me, child. What do you want to be when you grow up? The question caught Kira off guard. She'd expected punishment, or dismissal, or some formal diplomatic acknowledgement. Not this. She thought about it seriously, because the Queen had asked seriously. I want to help people, she said finally. The way you helped my parents. I want to be able to make the impossible happen when someone needs it. Queen Alzera's laugh was like crystal chimes in a storm. A noble ambition. And how do you plan to achieve this? Kira looked at the Queen, at this being who commanded fleets and ruled worlds, who had overturned protocols and launched rescues based on a child's desperate plea. Who wielded power like a scalpel, precise and purposeful. I'll marry you, Kira said with absolute 7-year-old certainty. Then I can help you help people. The throne room went perfectly silent. The chief advisor made a strangled sound. Commander Thex's antennae snapped to full attention. But Queen Alzera simply studied the child before her, reading something in that earnest declaration that others might have missed. Marriage is a serious commitment, the Queen said carefully. Not a career path. You asked what I wanted to be. That's what I want to be. Someone like you. Kira's chin lifted. Someone who saves people. The Queen rose from her throne, descended the steps with deliberate grace, and knelt before Kira. They were nearly eye to eye now, human child and alien monarch, separated by biology and culture and centuries of evolutionary divergence. Then I will make you a promise, Queen Alzera said. When you are grown, if you still wish it, if you have proven yourself worthy not through birth but through action, I will consider your proposal. But know this, child. The path you speak of is not made of pretty words and noble intentions. It is built from difficult choices, impossible burdens, and the weight of every life you fail to save along with those you succeed in protecting. I understand, Kira said, though she only half did. No. The Queen's voice gentled. You don't. Not yet. But perhaps one day you will. She stood, returning to her full imposing height. For now, go to your parents. They will wake soon, and they should see your face first. Kira bowed again and left, escorted by Thex. As they walked toward the medical wing, she could feel the weight of the Queen's words settling into her bones like truth too large to fully comprehend. Behind them, the Queen watched the child disappear down the corridor, her expression unreadable. Your Majesty, the chief advisor ventured carefully. Surely you don't intend to actually. Intent is a complex thing, Queen Alzara said. The child showed courage today. Intelligence. Determination. These are rare qualities, especially in one so young. She returned to her throne, settling into it with a sigh that spoke of 40 cycles bearing the weight of crowns. We will see what she becomes. Time shapes us all. The years turned like pages in a book Kira hadn't known she was writing. Her parents recovered, stronger in some ways for having nearly lost everything in the void. They continued their diplomatic work, though her mother walked with a limp now, and her father's hands shook slightly when he thought no one was watching. Kira grew. She studied everything the palace libraries offered, devouring texts on Valerian law, human-alien relations, military strategy, and emergency response protocols. She learned to read body language across 7 species, to speak Valerian with proper harmonic inflection, to understand the difference between what people said and what they meant. On her 10th birthday, she asked permission to observe the Queen's daily councils. Permission was granted, though she had to sit in the corner, silent, taking notes she'd review later in the privacy of her quarters. She watched Queen Alzara navigate border disputes, trade negotiations, and the endless complexity of ruling a star system where 15 sentient species coexisted in careful balance. On her 13th birthday, she joined the Palace Youth Service Program, working alongside young Valorians in administrative roles. She filed reports, carried messages, learned how governments actually function beneath the grand declarations and treaty signings. The work was tedious and essential, and she loved every moment of it. On her 16th birthday, her parents sat her down with serious faces. We've been offered a posting, her father said. The outer reaches. Important diplomatic work. But far from here, her mother added. We wanted you to choose. Come with us, or stay and complete your studies at the Palace Academy. Kira looked at the parents who had nearly died in the dark, who had been saved by a queen's command and a child's desperate sprint through forbidden corridors. She loved them with an intensity that sometimes hurt. I need to stay, she said. This is where I'm meant to be. They understood. They'd always understood that their daughter had found something in the palace, some purpose that transcended family or homeland. They left with promises of regular communication, with tears that dried eventually, with the knowledge that they'd raised someone who chose duty over comfort. Kira threw herself into her studies with renewed focus. She graduated top of her class, turned down 3 prestigious positions with other governments, and requested assignment to the Palace Administrative Corps. The request was granted. She started at the bottom, filing reports and managing schedules, learning the machinery of power from the inside. She was 19 when she first sat in on a crisis council meeting, not as an observer but as a junior analyst. A mining colony had gone dark. Rescue teams were being scrambled. The Queen listened to recommendations, weighed options, made decisions that would determine who lived and who became statistics. Kira spoke once, offering information about the colony's backup systems that the senior analysts had missed. Queen Alzara glanced at her, nodded, and incorporated the data into her calculations. 300 miners came home alive because of those backup systems. After the meeting, as others filed out, the Queen gestured for Kira to remain. You did well, Queen Alzara said. Your analysis was precise. Thank you, Your Majesty. Kira stood at attention, years of palace protocol having shaped her posture into something that spoke respect without servility. You've grown, the Queen observed. It wasn't small talk. It was acknowledgement of time passing, of a child becoming something else. Do you remember your promise? Kira's heart kicked against her ribs. Every day, Your Majesty. And do you still hold to it? More than ever. Queen Elzara studied her for a long moment. Then prove it. Not with words or childhood declarations. Prove it with action. Show me you can bear the weight. How? Kira asked. By continuing exactly as you are. By learning. By growing. By making yourself into someone worthy of standing beside power rather than simply seeking it. The Queen's tone wasn't cruel, but it was absolutely honest. I have watched you, Kira Thorne. I have seen your progress. But watching is not the same as trusting. Trust must be earned through fire. I understand. Good. You're dismissed. Kira bowed and left, her mind racing. The Queen had remembered. After 12 years, she'd remembered a 7-year-old's desperate declaration. That had to mean something. She worked harder. She took assignments others refused, the impossible schedules and thankless tasks that ground down idealists and exposed those who sought glory over service. She spent 3 months on a plague-stricken moon coordinating relief efforts. She spent 6 months mediating a water rights dispute between 2 colonies that had been feuding for generations. She spent a year restructuring the palace emergency response protocols, making sure no child would ever have to steal a tablet and run through forbidden corridors to save their parents again. She was 23 when the assassination attempt happened. The Queen's convoy was returning from a diplomatic summit when the charges detonated. 3 vehicles destroyed instantly. 17 dead. Queen Elzara pulled from the wreckage with a fractured carapace and internal bleeding, rushed to the palace medical facility while the capital city held its breath. Kira was in the command center when the news came. She watched senior officials panic, watched the chain of command wobble, watched the government begin to fracture under the weight of uncertainty. The Crown Prince was off-world. The council was divided. No one could agree on who held authority during the Queen's incapacitation. She spent 48 hours coordinating responses, using every contact she'd built and every lesson she'd learned. She kept the government functioning by sheer force of will and intimate knowledge of how power actually moved through the palace. She made decisions that weren't technically hers to make, accepted responsibility that wasn't technically hers to bear, and held everything together with bloody fingernails until the Crown Prince returned and the Queen opened her eyes. When Queen Elzara recovered enough to receive visitors, Kira was among the first summoned. The Queen lay in a medical pod, healing matrix covering her damaged carapace. But her eyes were alert, and her voice, though weak, carried its usual precise authority. I am told you kept the government from imploding, she said without preamble. I did what needed doing, Your Majesty. Stepping beyond your authority. Making decisions above your rank. Risking charges of overreach. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? Kira met the Queen's compound eyes steadily. Because someone had to. Because the alternative was chaos. Because I've spent 16 years learning how this palace works, and that knowledge was needed. And if I had died? If your actions had been judged illegal? Then I would have accepted the consequences. Kira's voice didn't waver. But you would have had a government waiting for your successor, instead of ashes and fighting. Queen Elzara's mandibles clicked softly, a sound Kira had learned meant deep thought. You've grown into someone formidable, Kira Thorne. I've tried to grow into someone useful, Your Majesty. Useful. The Queen seemed to taste the word. Such a human concept. Valorians speak of honor, of strength, of glory. Humans speak of usefulness, as if value is measured by function. Isn't it? Kira asked. What good is glory if it doesn't serve a purpose? The Queen laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at healing tissue. You argue like a Valorian and think like a human. A dangerous combination. Is that a compliment, Your Majesty? Perhaps. Queen Elzara's eyes fixed on Kira with new intensity. Do you still hold to that childhood promise? After everything you've seen, everything you've learned about the cost of power? Kira's pulse hammered. This was the moment. 16 years after a desperate child had run through forbidden corridors, after a queen had remembered and watched and waited. I do, Your Majesty. More than ever. Then, here is my answer. The queen's voice dropped, became something private and profound. I am old by Valerian standards. I have ruled for 56 cycles, watched stars burn out and new ones ignite. I have outlived 3 potential heirs and buried more friends than I care to count. The throne weighs heavier each year. She paused, and in that silence, Kira felt the future pivoting. I need someone beside me who understands sacrifice. Who has proven themselves through action rather than birth. Who sees power as responsibility rather than privilege. Queen Alzara's antennae lifted in what might have been hope or might have been resignation. I need someone I can trust absolutely, who will tell me truth when others offer only agreement. Someone who will carry the weight when my strength fails. I will be that person, Kira said. I swear it. I know you will. You already have been. The queen extended one hand, the gesture formal and binding. So yes, Kira Thorne. When I am fully healed, when the proper ceremonies can be observed, I will accept your proposal. Not because a child demanded it 16 years ago, but because the woman you've become has earned it. Kira took the offered hand, feeling chitin against skin, alien warmth against human warmth. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed in this moment of impossible victory. Thank you, Your Majesty. Call me Alzara, the queen said softly. At least when we're alone. It's time you learned to think of me as more than a monarch. The wedding took place 6 months later, after Queen Alzara had fully recovered and, after Kira had navigated the Byzantine approval process required for a human to marry into Valerian royalty. The ceremony blended both cultures, human vows spoken in Valerian harmonics, Valerian rituals adapted for human physiology. The capital city celebrated for 3 days. Dignitaries from across the sector attended. Kira's parents wept with joy and perhaps some bewilderment at their daughter's impossible path. Commander Thex, now head of palace security, stood witness with antennae raised in approval. And through it all, Kira remembered a 7-year-old child sprinting through forbidden corridors, remembered a queen who had chosen to listen when she could have chosen dismissal, remembered every lesson learned and every impossible weight carried in the years between. The night after the ceremony, as the celebrations finally quieted, Kira stood with Alzara on the palace balcony overlooking the capital. 3 moons hung overhead, same as they had 16 years ago, when a desperate child had burst into a throne room demanding miracles. Do you regret it? Alzara asked quietly. Choosing this path? You could have had a simpler life. Kira thought about it honestly, because Alzara deserved honesty. No. Simple was never what I wanted. I wanted to matter. To help. To stand beside someone who could make the impossible happen and learn to do the same. And have you learned? I'm still learning. I'll probably always be learning. Good. Alzara's hand found Kira's, alien fingers intertwining with human ones. Because tomorrow there's a trade dispute that needs mediating, and the defense grid is showing anomalies that need investigating. And 17 reports are waiting on my desk. Our desk now, Kira corrected gently. Our desk, Alzara agreed. Are you ready? Kira looked out over the city, over the palace that had become home, over the life she'd chosen with absolute certainty at 7, and reaffirmed every day since. She thought about the weight of crowns and the cost of power, about the impossible burdens Alzara had warned her about all those years ago. She squeezed Alzara's hand and smiled. I've been ready since I was 7 years old. They stood together watching the moons rise, queen and consort, Valerian and human, bound by promises made in desperation and kept through dedication. The palace hummed with life around them, problems waiting and decisions looming, but for this moment they simply existed in the space between then and tomorrow. A 7-year-old child had demanded miracles and promised forever. A 23-year-old woman had proven herself worthy of both. And a queen who had seen empires rise and fall had chosen to believe that sometimes the most impossible promises were the ones worth keeping. 2/2